one of only 3 documents from the First Temple period. The document reads, "To Ishmael send," but much of the rest is torn and tattered.
2,700 years ago. These are very rare documents.
The Ishmael papyrus is written in ancient Hebrew and was likely from the Judean desert caves, where its 2 First Temple brother documents were also found.
For nearly 2,000 years, they were considered unreadable, blackened, fragile remnants of a world lost to fire and ash. Hundreds of scrolls, preserved in the catastrophic eruption that buried Pompeii, sat in silence.
Herculaneum is sometimes referred to as the other Pompeii.
Their words locked away forever, until a 21-year-old computer science student did the impossible. He taught a machine to see what human eyes could not, and from the shadowed remains of history, a single word emerged: porphyras, purple. But this was not just a color. It was a symbol of absolute power, wealth beyond imagination, and the opulence of Rome itself. What secrets had been hidden in these scrolls for centuries, waiting for someone brave or curious enough to uncover them? That one word opened a door to a world scholars had only dreamed of: imperial courts, secret trade networks, lost philosophies, and the voices of thinkers silenced for millennia. This is the story of how technology resurrected the past, how a single word can unlock civilizations, and how the scrolls buried by a volcano are rewriting everything we thought we knew about the ancient world. And at the heart of it all lies a mystery that has haunted historians for centuries: the final hours of one of history's greatest minds. The day the world turned inside out. To understand why these scrolls matter, you need to understand how they survived. And to understand that, you need to travel back to a late summer morning in the year 79 AD, when the most catastrophic natural disaster in Roman history was about to unfold. The sun rose on a landscape of unparalleled prosperity along the Bay of Naples. The mountain that dominated the horizon, Vesuvius, was not feared for its size. It was appreciated for its fertility. Thriving vineyards covered its slopes. Beautiful villas dotted its flanks. At its feet, the bustling commercial hub of Pompeii and the elegant seaside retreat of Herculaneum nestled in comfortable luxury. Rich Romans visited these cities for commerce, relaxation, and exquisite art. They had no idea that beneath their feet, pressure had been building for centuries. They knew Vesuvius was a volcano. It had erupted before, more than 300 years earlier. But that was ancient history. Living memory contained no fire, no ash, no rivers of molten rock. The mountain had slept for so long that the civilization at its base felt perfectly safe. They could not have been more wrong. Experts believe it was around 1 o'clock in the afternoon on August 24th.
At 1 p.m. on August 24th, 79 AD, after centuries of inactivity, Mount Vesuvius erupts.
When the slumber ended. With a cataclysmic roar that shattered the afternoon calm, the mountain exploded. It tore its own peak asunder and hurled a monstrous dark column of pumice, ash, and superheated gas miles into the stratosphere. For the thousands living in its shadow, the world had just turned inside out. The only surviving eyewitness account comes from a terrified teenager named Pliny the Younger, watching from the safety of Misenum across the bay. In letters to the historian Tacitus, he described a mushroom-shaped cloud resembling a stone pine tree, a phenomenon so distinctive that scientists now call such events Plinian eruptions in his honor. He wrote of day turning to night, of relentless, suffocating hail of pumice stones that piled up like snow, trapping people in their homes and collapsing roofs under the weight. His uncle, Pliny the Elder, commander of the Roman fleet, saw the eruption and ordered his ships to cross the bay in a daring rescue attempt. He never returned. His body was found days later, overcome by toxic fumes. a scholar and admiral killed by the very natural phenomenon he had sought to study. The destruction was not a single event, but a methodical, multi-phase annihilation. The initial fallout of pumice and ash primarily targeted Pompeii, burying it under meters of lightweight rock. But for Herculaneum, the end came more swiftly and more terribly. In the early hours of August 25th, the eruption column collapsed. A pyroclastic surge, a wave of incandescent gas and ash, heated to nearly 500 degrees Celsius, and traveling at hurricane speeds, raced down the mountain. It instantly vaporized every living thing in Herculaneum. The searing heat carbonized organic material, wood, food, and most significantly, a vast library of papyrus scrolls. They turned to charcoal in an instant. Subsequent surges buried the city under 20 meters of hardite volcanic material, sealing it in an airtight tomb. While Pompeii was entombed in lighter, more accessible ash, Herculaneum was encased in a concrete-like shell. That difference would dramatically alter the course of its rediscovery 17 centuries later. The library that refused to speak. For nearly 1,700 years, both cities slept beneath the earth. Their names faded from memory into local legend. Then, in 1709, a farmer digging a well near Naples stumbled upon magnificent pieces of marble. They turned out to be seats from Herculaneum's buried theater. Word reached Prince d'Elbeuf, an Austrian cavalry officer, who began tunneling into the ruins to pillage statues for his villa. It was a crude and destructive start to what would become one of archaeology's greatest discoveries.
The buried city of Pompeii has given archaeologists astonishing snapshots of life in Asia.
The true magnitude of what lay beneath was revealed in 1750, when workers following the early tunnels broke into a sumptuous seaside villa. They found a building of unparalleled grandeur, believed to have belonged to Lucius Calpurnius Piso Caesoninus, the father-in-law of Julius Caesar himself. But within a small room, they made a discovery that would eclipse all the statues and mosaics combined. It was a library, not of parchment or wax tablets, but of hundreds of papyrus scrolls stacked on shelves in a Roman bibliotheca. They were carbonized, blackened, and impossibly fragile, resembling lumps of charcoal more than books. In the intense heat of the pyroclastic surge, they had been burned yet simultaneously preserved. Their words were locked inside a brittle carbon shell. This was the Villa of the Papyri. Its contents represented the only surviving library from the ancient world. Nowhere else on Earth did such a collection exist. The Library of Alexandria was destroyed. The great archives of Rome were scattered and lost. But here, sealed by volcanic glass, hundreds of texts had waited in darkness for someone to read them. The initial attempts were disastrous. Some scrolls were simply shattered to dust by researchers who did not understand their fragility. Early unrolling machines, though sometimes partially successful, often destroyed the very texts they sought to reveal. The scrolls became the ultimate locked room mystery, a treasure chest that no key could open. For 275 years, scholars tried everything: chemical treatments, careful physical manipulation, advanced imaging techniques. Nothing worked. The scrolls were carbonized papyrus. The ink used to write on them was carbon-based, made from soot or charcoal mixed with water. Trying to distinguish carbon ink from carbonized paper was like trying to detect a shadow cast on a pitch-black wall. The words were physically present, embedded in the fibers, but they were invisible to every tool humanity possessed, until one man refused to accept their silence. The prophet of digital unwrapping. Dr. Brent Seals was not an archaeologist. He was not a classicist. He was a computer scientist at the University of Kentucky, and he had an idea that most experts considered impossible. What if the key to unlocking the scrolls was not a finer scalpel or a gentler chemical, but an entirely new kind of vision? What if you could teach a machine to see what human eyes could not? The journey began not in Italy, but in the deserts of Israel. For years, SEALs had been developing algorithms to virtually unwrap damaged manuscripts. The real test came with the Engedi scroll, a carbonized lump of ash discovered near the Dead Sea, utterly destroyed by a 6th century fire. To any traditional archaeologist, it was a total loss, an object of pure despair. SEALs saw something different. His team used high-resolution X-ray microcomputed tomography to scan the scroll's interior in 3 dimensions, creating a digital replica of its structure. Then they deployed groundbreaking virtual unwrapping software, a complex algorithm that could digitally flatten the scroll's rolled-up layers without ever physically touching it. The moment of truth was electric. From a formless, charred log, Hebrew script began to emerge. Clear and readable, it was the Book of Leviticus. The Engedi scroll was not just a success, it was a miracle. It proved unequivocally that text could be read from within a destroyed scroll without ever opening it. But Herculaneum was a far more formidable adversary. The Engedi scroll used ink containing metallic elements, making it visible to X-rays. The Herculaneum scrolls used pure carbon ink, carbon on carbon. Invisible to every imaging technique SEALs had developed, he could map the intricate crumpled topography of a scroll's surface with breathtaking precision. He could digitally flatten it into a pristine virtual page, but the page was blank. What followed was a decade-long struggle fought in university labs and grant application committees. SEALs became a man possessed, juggling the roles of computer scientist, historian, and fundraiser. He spoke a language of algorithms and pixels to classicists who dealt in philology and papyrology. He tried to convince his peers in computer science that the most compelling challenge for their field lay in a 2,000-year-old pile of ash. The skepticism was constant. Could this digital dream ever deliver results? Was he chasing a phantom? But from despair, a new idea formed. If the ink could not be seen directly, perhaps its presence could be detected indirectly. Minute changes in papyrus texture, infinitesimal bumps and cracks left by the ancient scribe's pen. This was a problem of pattern recognition at the atomic scale, a task ideally suited for machine learning. But training such a system required monumental amounts of data and processing power far beyond the resources of a single academic lab. So Dr. SEALs made a fateful decision. He would take his lifetime's work, his unsolved puzzle, and pose the problem to the world. The race to read the unreadable. In 2023, something unprecedented happened in the world of ancient scholarship. A coalition of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, tech enthusiasts, artificial intelligence researchers, and classical scholars launched an audacious competition that would have seemed like science fiction just a decade earlier. They called it the Vesuvius Challenge, and its premise was both simple and revolutionary. Offer substantial cash prizes, eventually totaling $1.5 million to anyone on Earth who could develop methods to read the unreadable scrolls. Democratize discovery. Open the problem to every programmer, every AI researcher, every curious mind on the planet willing to try. The competition ignited something extraordinary. Within weeks, thousands of participants from dozens of countries had registered. They congregated on forums and messaging platforms, forming a digital community unlike anything traditional archaeology had ever witnessed. This was not the solitary toil of scholars working in isolation for decades. This was a global brainstorming session unfolding in real time, with breakthroughs shared within hours of discovery and failures analyzed collectively so others could learn from them. The structure of the challenge encouraged both collaboration and rivalry simultaneously. Participants openly shared code and techniques, building on each other's work, while still competing fiercely for the prizes that awaited whoever crossed the finish line first. Some focused their energy on virtual unwrapping algorithms, developing new methods to digitally flatten the impossibly crumpled layers of the scrolls. Others concentrated on ink detection, training machine learning models to identify the faintest traces of ancient writing. Still others tackled geometric reconstruction, mapping the damaged and distorted surfaces with ever greater precision. Among the thousands of participants worldwide, certain personalities began to emerge from the digital crowd. Luke Farrater was a 21-year-old computer science student from the University of Nebraska who discovered the challenge while working as an intern at SpaceX. Listening to a podcast about the scrolls during his daily commute, he became captivated by the technical puzzle in a way that consumed his every free moment. His approach was characteristically hands-on and experimental. Unable to afford authentic ancient materials, he purchased modern papyrus from Amazon and charred it in an oven at his father's robotics company, creating his own test scrolls to understand the material properties he was working with. Meanwhile, Yusef Nader in Germany brought expertise in machine learning and computer vision that complemented Farrater's experimental approach. Julian Schilliger in Switzerland contributed his own specialized knowledge, developing techniques for segmenting the complex three-dimensional structures within the scans. Across time zones and continents, these strangers became collaborators, united by obsession with a problem that had defeated the greatest minds for nearly 3 centuries. The critical breakthrough came when researchers identified what they called the crackle pattern. These were faint textures and microscopic surface variations in the three-dimensional scans that corresponded to where ink had been applied to papyrus 2,000 years ago. The ink had not merely stained the surface. It had physically altered the fiber structure in ways that were invisible to the human eye, but detectable by algorithms trained to recognize the pattern. Machine learning models were developed and refined through countless iterations, each version slightly better at distinguishing the ghost of ancient ink from the noise of carbonized plant material. The moment everything changed arrived without warning. Luke Farrater was analyzing a section of scroll data when his trained algorithm flagged a cluster of patterns. He stared at his screen as shapes emerged from what had appeared to be blank nothingness. Letters. Greek letters, forming themselves into something recognizable. A word. The first word read from these scrolls in 2,000 years. Porphyras. Purple. The proof of concept electrified the entire community. If one word could be recovered, then sentences were possible. If sentences were possible, then entire texts could be decoded. The race intensified dramatically as the December deadline approached. Competitors refined their models obsessively, comparing results, combining techniques, pushing toward the finish line in a collaborative sprint that felt more like a scientific moonshot than an academic exercise. In late 2023, the winners were announced. Luke Farrater, Yusef Nader, and Julian Schilliger, the transcontinental trio who had combined their expertise across 3 countries, claimed the $700,000 grand prize. Their achievement was staggering. They had successfully recovered over 2,000 Greek letters from one of the scrolls, far exceeding the competition's requirements and proving definitively that artificial intelligence could accomplish what human hands and eyes never could. The Philosophers' War. The first scrolls to be decoded did not reveal serene poetry or gentle wisdom. They unleashed a battle cry from an ancient intellectual war that scholars had only glimpsed through fragments and second-hand accounts. What emerged from the carbonized papyrus was a philosophical battlefield preserved in stunning detail. Philodemus was not a recluse meditating in isolation. He was a teacher embedded with the Roman elite, a propagandist for the Epicurean school in a world teeming with rival ideologies. His most formidable opponents were the Stoics, followers of Zeno and Chrysippus, who presented a starkly different vision of the good life. The decoded scrolls reveal this conflict with startling directness. Philodemus does not simply outline his own Epicurean views, he strategically quotes his Stoic rivals line by line, specifically to dismantle their arguments. The scrolls become a record of intellectual combat, preserving the very words of the opposition solely for their destruction. At the heart of this war was a fundamental clash over the nature of pleasure and virtue. For the Epicureans, pleasure was the absence of pain and fear, a state of serene tranquility they called ataraxia. It was the ultimate goal of existence, achievable through modest living, knowledge, and friendship. But the Stoics saw the world differently. For them, virtue derived from living in accordance with reason was the only true good. Pleasure, along with pain and wealth, was merely indifferent, something that could be used well or poorly, but possessed no inherent moral value. Philodemus attacks these Stoic arguments with surgical precision. He quotes texts likely from Chrysippus himself, then masterfully dissects each claim. What makes this discovery explosive is that Chrysippus was one of the most prolific writers of antiquity, said to have produced over 700 works. Yet not a single one survives in complete form. His influence shaped Roman law and thought for centuries, but his actual words were lost, known only through summaries and fragments. Now, within the rebuttals of his enemy, Chrysippus speaks again. Philodemus's scrolls have become an unintended ark, carrying fragments of the very philosophy he sought to sink. The library is not a monologue. It is a multi-voiced dialogue, capturing the sound of ancient philosophy in practice, not as settled dogma, but as fierce living debate. If the works of Philodemus contain these priceless verbatim quotes from lost philosophers, what other treasures wait in the unread scrolls? What other silenced voices are trapped in the carbonized layers? The answer came sooner than anyone expected, and it involved one of the most famous names in human history. The death of Plato. The most dramatic revelation from the Herculaneum scrolls pulls back the curtain on Plato's final hours. Not Plato, the marble statue of philosophical perfection. Plato, the flesh and blood man, dying in his bed, still arguing about music with his last breath. The newly decoded text describes the scene in intimate detail. Though weak with fever, Plato listened as a Thracian slave girl played the flute at his bedside. With his last strength, he criticized her performance, noting her poor sense of rhythm. This was not a random comment from a dying man. It was a final defiant act of criticism from a thinker who had spent his entire life arguing about music's power and its dangers. Plato was famously suspicious of the flute. In his Republic, he argued that certain musical instruments could weaken a person's spirit and disrupt the rational order of the soul. The flute was particularly problematic. Its wild emotional sound was associated with Dionysian frenzy, considered a threat to the self-control Plato valued above all. For the great philosopher, the Thracian girl's music represented exactly the undisciplined art he believed had no place in a well-ordered society. His final critique was a powerful echo of his lifelong philosophy. Even in death, he could not stop being Plato. But the scroll provides something even more valuable than biography. It gives archaeologists a precise location. The text specifies that Plato was buried in a private garden within the Academy's grounds, near a sacred shrine to the Muses. This exact spot, lost for millennia, is no longer a mystery. It is a potential site for future excavation, a direct coordinate to the physical remains of a foundational pillar of Western thought. The implications are staggering. If this biographical detail about Plato survived in these scrolls, what else might be waiting? The complete works of Sappho, whose existing fragments hint at poetic genius but survive only in tantalizing pieces? The missing books of Livy's monumental history of Rome? Eyewitness accounts of Alexander the Great's campaigns? Complete tragedies by Aeschylus or Sophocles that were celebrated in their time but vanished in subsequent centuries? The scientific writings of Archimedes could be concealed within the villa, revealing mathematical and engineering insights we have only partially understood. Even more tantalizing is the possibility of recovering the works of Democritus, the father of atomism, whose theory that the universe is composed of tiny indivisible particles was a stunning premonition of modern physics. His ideas survive only in criticism and paraphrase. To read his own words would connect us directly with one of the most prescient minds of antiquity. 2,000 years of silence, and now the scrolls of Herculaneum are speaking. Words once thought lost forever are emerging from carbon and ash, revealing the minds, debates, and philosophies of a world we believed could only be imagined. The villa that buried them in fire is now a lens into the intellectual life of antiquity, where ideas clashed, evolved, and shaped the foundations of Western thought. But if these scrolls are only the beginning, what other voices remain trapped in time, waiting for the right technology, the right insight, the right moment to be heard? How many entire libraries, entire civilizations, lie just beyond our reach, their knowledge waiting patiently for someone to uncover it? The Library of the Damned has found its voice, but its revelations are far from complete. Each word recovered challenges what we thought we knew, reshapes our understanding, and forces us to confront the fragility and brilliance of human history. What else is hidden in the shadows of the past? And are we ready for the truths that might change everything we think we know about the world we inherited? The story is only beginning, and the scrolls are just the first whispers of secrets that have waited millennia to be heard.